Welcome to Papa's Workshop. In today's video, I am so excited to be able to bring you a video on how to make the countertop for that bath vanity that I just recently made. Now this is actually made from the Stone Coat countertop epoxies. That is a fantastic product to be able to work with. And this countertop absolutely turned out gorgeous. And I want to show you how I made it from the very beginning all the way to the end. So let's get started. I'm starting off this project with this piece of MDF. That's medium density fiberboard. And basically, it's a bunch of sawdust that's glued together. But if you look at this, it has the rounded edges. I also had it rounded over. This was actually a tabletop that I was going to use for another project and never did. But I started off and I cut the backsplash, and those were 4 inches wide and by the length of the board itself. And then I started cutting the actual size of the countertop. Now I wanted to take into consideration the roundover that I already had on the top, and I wanted to take into consideration that roundover that I had for the edge, because that I could all use again and not have to recut it. So those were some careful considerations that I made when I cut out the actual size of the countertop. Now part of the backsplash didn't have that roundover, so I just went over to the router table and put that bit in there to be able to handle that same size, and rounded that over there. Next, it was heading over to the workbench to lay out exactly where the sink is going to be. Now this cutout had a template that came with the sink, so I needed to be able to lay it out exactly on the countertop where it needed to be. And I marked the center line to begin with, and then I actually laid out exactly how I wanted this positioned. The most important decision that I had to make is how far from that front edge back to the beginning of this cutout for this sink. Too close and it wouldn't fit. Too far away and it would just be inconvenient. So after I had everything laid out, I put it back on the cabinet to measure it. Now this is all ready to cut out, and I can go ahead and cut this out with a jigsaw. Now one of the things that I made are these little templates right here that has the radius in it. Now the radius for this was 9/16 of an inch, and that was according to the plans. And the way I was able to determine that is I just actually drew this out and then measured it, and this was a 9/16 inch radius. So I went ahead and made these, and they will actually go right into the corner, just like that. I'll put that one up here for now. And then I can cut small straight blocks and put in and fill this out. Now I really need to go ahead and make 2 more. Now I realize I've got a CNC machine. I don't need to set up these templates at all. I don't need to set it up for the router. I can actually let the CNC machine do all of the cutting. I think that's going to work out pretty well. So let's take this countertop over to the CNC machine and get it set up. For those who don't have the CNC machine, using the little template like that works real well. And you'll cut really on the inside of this line. You don't want to cut right up to the edge. You want the router to do that job for you. The other thing that I want to point out is these backsplash are actually cut long. And I wanted them long on purpose, because after I pour the resin and I'm ready to install them, I can actually cut this to the proper length with the resin on it finished, and be able to cut it to size to be able to fit directly to the wall. And if you noticed in the camera how these are both cut long, that's actually intentional. And what I'm going to do when I install this will sit right there, because I actually want this to be recessed back just ever so slightly, and I'll be able to cut this to length. But in the meantime, let's take the countertop over to the CNC machine and get it set up. The router bit that I'm going to use for this is a 1/4 inch. And this is a 1/4 inch 2-flute spiral bit. Now if you look at this, this is actually a downcut bit, because as this bit turns, it looks as if it's turning the material down. So that should give a very clean cut. And that will be cutting on the inside of this tool path that I have literally drawn on the table itself. And we'll set this up in the computer in just a moment. Now, one of the things that I want to do is mark the exact center. So I'm going to use the center point as my XY0 position. So I went ahead and found the center point here. So I know exactly where the center will be, and that's where I'm going to place my router bit on the CNC machine. Now, because I only have one chance at this, I went ahead and marked the center in two different ways. One is I took the measurement from here all the way up to here and just divided that in half. And I did the same thing across the horizontal. And I found the center point. And from there I drew the lines. And of course, the easier way to do it, with the rectangle laid out, I just went ahead and went from one diagonal line down to the other diagonal line to form my X in the center. And if you can see, that's exactly in the center. So that is going to be perfect. I have the countertop now in position and all secured. And I'm using the bump stops to be able to hold it in place left and right, as well as the additional bump stops to be able to hold it down. Now, for this application, because of the size, I am going to be using the tabs so that this center piece of the cutout does not move. The next question is, how did I design this? So let me show you real quick. I'm just going to open up a brand new window, and I'm going to come up to the Shapes menu and select a rectangle. Let me just bring it up here in the center of the area where you can see it. And I need to be able to set on the X-axis. I'm going to set this at my 11.5. And on the Y-axis, it's going to be 17.88 inches. I want to go ahead and change my cut and cut this on the inside. I do not want this to be a pocket. I want to cut it on the inside. And I want to make sure that I have the bit set for the 1/4 inch. Now, right now, these corners are 90 degrees, and I want to be able to make the shape, and I want to be able to have the radius. Now, I said this was 9/16 of an inch. If I convert that over to a decimal, that's going to be 0.5625 of an inch. So now I have the radius. Remember, I want to be able to carve this where it's in the center. So all I need to be able to do is have this highlighted at the center and then be able to select 0 on the X and the Y axis, and I am done. That is just how simple that it is. And by sliding that over, I'll slide it up. This is where I'll put the bit to be able to start the carving. And I do want to have this cut all the way through. So I'm going to just go ahead and have this all the way down. I do want the tabs. I can hover over the tab, hold down the left mouse, bring it up over into the center. Same thing with these up here. Hold down the left mouse and slide it over. So that way I'll have 4 tabs on the corners. This will cut all the way through. I don't want to be real aggressive with this. If I come over to the cut settings, I'm going to leave this at 50 inches per minute, and I'm going to go ahead and carve this at about 0.05. I do want to have, I don't need to worry about the rasper because we're going to be just cutting the slot. So I can leave that right there. I do want this to be able to ramp in, and that will take care of it. How long is this going to take to be able to carve? It's going to take about 19 minutes, and I'm okay with that. I want this to be slow, and I want this to be very careful at how this carves out. And that's what it's going to look like. It will have multiple passes, and that's okay. The last thing that I want to double check is the thickness of the material. And when I went and checked the actual thickness of the MDF, it is actually 0.763, not the 0.75 of an inch. So in that case, I want to come back over to the material and I want to change that to 0.77 of an inch. I want to make sure that it does carve all the way through. So that will be taken care of now. So from here, I want to go ahead back over to my cut settings. I want to change the cut settings. I want to go ahead and cut this at 0.08. So this is the settings, 50 inches per minute. The plunge rate will be the 9 inches per minute, and the depth per pass will be at 0.08. Don't need anything here, so I'm just going to have this on the offset, and this will ramp in. So from here, I want to go ahead and simulate, and this is going to take about 9 minutes to be able to carve out. And if I look at this up close, you can see the number of passes that it's going to take, and that's actually okay. I don't mind this taking 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 passes, actually 6 passes to be able to go through this material, because I want to be able to have it go slow and do a nice, really good cut. I have the CNC machine running and I'm going through the homing cycle. One of the things that I want to do is to make sure that this is exactly square. So I went ahead and put this right on the line where I had it, and now I'm going to move it to the far end of the sink opening. Now the 227 is halfway. I'm going to go ahead and move it halfway and take a look. And you can see that looks really good. So I'm going to go ahead and go one more to the far corner. And that looks excellent. So I know that that is going to be just right. It's exactly where I want it. That front edge is crucial. So now I'm going to go ahead and bring it back to this XY0 position right in the center. And then I'll go ahead and change bits to my 1/4 inch bit. This is an excellent opportunity to verify the calibration. That brings me right back to my XY0 position. Change the bit and get this hole cut out. Now you notice I also changed this to the millimeters to be able to do all of these tests. Now I typically use the inches to be able to do the carving, but to do measurements like this, yes, I do. I use the millimeters quite often. Now it's time to be able to go ahead and get this machine carving, but I wanted to take just a moment too and talk about the use of the millimeters. Anytime that I need really detailed, very specific, and very accurate measurements, I'll switch over and use the millimeters, because 1 millimeter is a whole lot easier to be able to work with than a 1/16 of an inch or a 32nd of an inch. Yeah, you get the drill. One of the main reasons that I use inches for the bulk of my projects is because, well, quite frankly, the majority of the subscribers that I have are in the United States and they're most familiar with the feet and inches, so that's why I use them. But you will see often in the different projects that I have is where I will be using the millimeters when I really need that good, accurate measurement. Now, let's get back to the project at hand. This is already cut out. Let's take a look. The line that it cut was absolutely perfect. The only imperfection was where human error came into play, and I was a little off of my line on that back. And that's far better than what I could have done with the templates and a router and cutting it out. As I flip over this project to be able to cut out the tabs, you can see clearly that it did cut all the way through, and that is perfect. That's exactly what I wanted to have happen. So with a knife, all I need to do is just simply cut those tabs, and this center portion drops out, and I have my countertop. And just with a little bit of sandpaper, you can't even see where the tabs were. That turned out absolutely perfect. It's time to grab the trim router, and with that same bit that I used in the router table a few moments ago, I'm going to do the round over for this cutout. And that is going to be a nice even edge to be able to have all the way around. It will allow the epoxy to be able to flow, and it's going to also give a nice feel for the countertop itself when it's in use. Well, with all the cutting done, it's time now to get it dust free. I'm ready to be able to have this painted with the undercoat, and this is really a primer. And I've got it set up on some little blocks. Now this is the paint that I'm using right here. It's the Stone Coat Countertop, and this is the epoxy undercoat, and it's in the white. Now, if you didn't have this and you wanted to be able to use a different undercoat, Stone Coat Countertops does recommend using the Bare Premium Plus paint and primer. And then you can get your choice of the color that you wish to be able to have this as the undercoat. Most common, I would say, would be the white or black. And in some cases, you'd be using the gray. But that is strictly up to you and the project that you're working on. And I want to stir this really well. Now this is a very thick paint. I will notice that. Now if I was doing a large project, I'd use a paint tray like this with a 4-inch or larger roller. But because this is such a small project, I'm just using this little small paint tray with a 3-inch roller. That'll do just fine. Now one of the things I am going to do, we're going to flip this over and we're going to paint the backside first. And I want to get good coverage on this first coat, and we are going to come back and do a second coat. Now we're going to wait about 3 hours after this first coat is done to be able to come back and do the second. Now we'll move over to the big one. Now I went ahead and did both coats on each of the sides. So this took a little bit of time, but I wanted the back side done first, and then I flipped it over and did 2 coats on the top. And this is the result. I think it looks fantastic. It's very even, and we're now ready to start with the epoxy. And with the epoxy, the biggest key to the whole thing is being able to get organized to begin with. Have everything that you need up front. Now you put in this resin. This is a 1-to-1. And I'm using the part B first, and then you put in the part A. And look how thick part A is. Now you're going to be required to use about 3 ounces per square foot, and I would actually recommend probably doing a little bit more than that. But they recommend 3 ounces of the product per square foot. And for my project, that means I need about 30 ounces of this resin to be able to cover this project. Now I'm doing a little something that's different. I'm only mixing up half the batch at once. Don't forget the gloves. But I'm going to do 2 different colors. I'm going to start off with a darker color, and then I'm going to come back and do the other 15 ounces, and I'm going to do it a little bit lighter. Now this is totally different than what they say with Stone Coat Countertop, but it's what I wanted to be able to do. Now, just so you know, the mixing, you got to mix it for at least 2 minutes. Now, one of the things that I forgot to do is put the masking tape on. And here's a lesson learned. This masking tape is old, and it was hard to work with. Buy yourself some fresh, new masking tape, because this did get on there, but it was a struggle. And you have to use masking tape. You cannot use painter's tape for this. Painter's tape will not hold. I have the tape on here now, and I want to show you. I have the tape all the way around all of the edges, and it's actually tucked underneath and taped to the bottom. Now you have plenty of working time. You've got a good 45 minutes. But now I'm taking each of my metallic colors and putting them in separate cups. And I'm also putting in the white and a black dye, and that's going to be in its own separate cup. Once I have that product in there, then I'm just going to go ahead and pour the epoxy in that I'd already mixed, and then I'm going to stir really, really good. And these metallic colors are gorgeous. They are going to make this project just sparkle and shine, and it's just going to be beautiful, and it's going to look like the natural stone. Now I'm using a popsicle stick as the stirs, and I'm using literally just 1 popsicle stick for each container, and that keeps it where it's consistent. But look at that color. It is just beautiful with the different sparkles in there, and I just absolutely love it so far. Now I'm adding in the white dye, because remember, this epoxy is clear, and then I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to stir this, and I'm also going to add just a tiny bit of the black. Now in this last cup, I'm putting in the white first, and I'm putting in quite a bit, but remember, it goes a long ways. Now this black, watch, I'm only going to use just a tiny, tiny little drop. And just look at this gorgeous color. This is going to be used to be able to blend throughout the whole project, and I'm also going to save some to be able to create some of the veins in this. I'm also adding some spray paint, both white and the silver metallic, to be able to add a really fantastic effect. The epoxy and this paint, when it's mixed together, really makes it pop. I still have epoxy in my original bucket, and now I want to be able to get just a good base to be able to begin with. And this is where the fun comes in. Do not sweat over this. I'm going to put in some of the white dye. I'm also going to put in the spray paint, and it's just a mixture of anything that you want to be able to add in just about any order. Keep it random and have fun with this. This is not something that you're going to have to really sweat over. But at this point, I am not thoroughly mixing it. In fact, this paint stick is getting ready to disappear once I have just this base set up. And you can look at this, and it's just turning out gorgeous. The different grays and the whites that's in this resin. So I really like this. And again, this is simple and it is easy. Now it's time to get rid of the paint stick and just grab these different cups at random and go ahead and put in the paint and mix it all together. Just a little bit of this color, a little bit of that color, and just keep it random and pour it in just a little at a time. Throw in some white paint, throw in some more metallic spray paint, and just grab these cups one at a time and just pour it in a manner that means nothing at all. It really has no effect as far as being precise about this. This is the beautiful part of this whole entire formula for being able to pour this resin. Now I gotta admit, when I first thought about this, I was nervous as could be, and then I realized these colors are all going to flow together. And the more random that you have these colors, it creates the different layers, and it's going to create a beautiful effect. So do not sweat over this. Just grab the different cups one at a time in any particular order and pour a little bit in. It creates the layers. And as you pour the epoxy out, it is going to create the different colors. And as you are pouring, it will change colors with the different mixture that you have. Okay, enough of me rambling. It's time to start pouring this. Now you notice this bucket was not stirred with the paint stick. I'm just taking this bucket now and pouring it in whatever configuration that I want. I do not want it to go where it's straight with the edges of the countertop itself. I want to be able to have it run at the diagonal angles. And you notice this is going to be a little bit of a darker color, as I mentioned to begin with. Now this is half of my mix. I'm going to mix the next half where it's actually a lighter color and fill in all of the different gaps. But you can see as this is being poured, there's really no pattern to this. And look at how it's starting to flow. As it flows, it creates the different patterns, and it looks just like the natural stone. Now you notice that blue tape in there? Remember guys, the blue tape doesn't work. That blue tape actually did come apart, and it did create some problems. So please get that fresh masking tape and use that. Now also with this first bucket, I'm making sure that I have product on all three of the components. I don't want to have all of this one color just in the one area. I want to be able to mix some through each of the areas of the different pieces, the backsplash as well as the countertop, so that I have all the color palettes on all the different parts. Once this was done, I didn't even scrape out the bucket. I just mixed up another batch that was a lighter color, and then filled in. And you can see here how I'm pouring literally on top of the first one. I'm also using it to fill in the gaps. And these lines, doing this where it crosses over, really makes a difference. And again, have fun with this. There is no set pattern that you have to be able to follow. It is going to work for you. The most important thing I want you to remember is to have fun. There's really no right and wrong way to be able to do this. And quite frankly, I would love to hear from the stone coat countertops on my thought process on being able to mix half the batch with the darker color and then half a batch with the lighter color. I had not seen that part done before, but I thought it was going to be a good idea for what the end result was that I was looking for. Now, as I'm finishing up this second bucket, I want you to notice how this product is already spreading out and it's already forming the different textures and the patterns that I wanted to be able to achieve. This self-leveling epoxy works amazing. And now I can just have fun with putting different lines and different veins in here wherever I want them. Now I still have some epoxy left in the buckets, but I noticed one thing, is that the surface tension from this primer still was not allowing this epoxy to really flow the way I wanted it to. So it was time to get the hands involved, and I wanted to be able to just be able to break that tension, spread that epoxy around, and then I take my individual cups and I could start spreading in more of the epoxy and filling in those little gaps and create the colors that I wanted. And again, there is no set pattern here. It's just whatever you want to be able to do in your project. By being able to use my hands, I was able to break the surface tension and allow that epoxy to be able to continue to flow and do its job. And don't forget, those little cups that you have with the individual colors, use those to create the veins, just like I did with this, where I can use the dark. And then using my fingers, I'm also moving that product around to create the different colors. And the result turns out beautiful. Now there's still a long ways for this to go before it settles down, but you can already see that it's really coming out nice. At this point, I'm just having fun. I'm taking some of this leftover epoxy with the different colors and just pouring it throughout the whole entire project. I want to be able to create these veins, and I'm using the white at this point to go over some of the darker areas. I'm using the popsicle sticks to be able to pull it through, stretch it out the way I want to so it makes it look natural. And then I can grab some of the darker color and do the same thing. And I want these veins to be able to go through the whole project. You want to be able to have the colors where they is consistent throughout all of the pieces. So here I'm pouring it through the main part of the countertop. I want to make sure that I have it both on the left and on the right side. And I want to be able to use this same color and these same type of veins over on the backsplashes as well. And if you do that, you're going to end up with some really beautiful results. Now this is a good time to be able to throw in some of the things that I've learned about this. One, you got to have masking tape, and you got to have new masking tape, not the old stuff. I had about 5 or 6 different rolls of the masking tape, and it was all old, and it just would not work for me. The other thing is the rubber gloves. You need to have some good rubber gloves, and my rubber gloves were not the best in the world for this epoxy. So make sure you have masking tape, good gloves, and to be able to get ready to work. Now that all this product is down, I'm taking a heat gun to begin with, and I'm going to try to move this product around and create some of the different effects with this. Now the heat gun makes it where you can move it a little bit slower, and then I wanted to try out the torch. So I went ahead and used the torch to continue to move the product around and to pop those bubbles. Either works. I found that it worked really well using either one. I will say this, the torch did make it happen faster, And look at how this is coming out. Now you can also see where that blue tape was failing, and I had to be able to prop it up a little bit because that epoxy started flowing off, and I had to save that. So no blue tape, guys. Now I've waited for about an hour and a half for this to set up, and you can see this epoxy just ever so slightly dripping off of my finger. That's the consistency that you want. Too early and you'll lose the design on because it will just flow off. Too late and it's not going to want to flow at all. So now I'm just going to grab this tape and peel it out and down and be able to have that flow right over the edges. Now at this point I only had one rubber glove because the other one tore and broke, so I'm having to be very careful. But at this point I'm just taking some of the product that was on the table itself and being able to smooth over these edges and being able to fill in any of the places where the epoxy was not on. And that breaks the surface tension and gets this epoxy flowing, and it'll just slowly come over the edge and seal the edges. I am definitely an advocate for being able to use rubber gloves, but if you don't have a rubber glove or you get a little epoxy on your hands, that's not the end of the world. You can use some 91% alcohol and be able to wash your hands in that, and that will take the epoxy off. So this is another good practice that you can learn from and be able to use it. Because at this point, I had to run to the store after this part was done and buy some new rubber gloves. As I pull this tape out and down away from the backsplash, you can see that epoxy starting to flow. This is exactly what you want to be able to happen. Now because these backsplashes are a little bit small, you have to be real careful because the one thing you don't want to have happen is the thing to fall over and hit the floor. That would ruin the whole project. So you do have to be careful. Now that the tape's gone, use that fingers, use your hand, be able to rub that epoxy, break the surface tension, and get that epoxy flowing. I want to show you now how it looks all finished, and it is absolutely gorgeous. Now the only thing that needs to happen now is I'm going to let this dry for 24 hours, and then I'm going to go ahead and put the clear coat on. But this, I am just so happy with the results of this. It just looks phenomenal to me. You tell me in the comments what you think about this process. And I want you to keep in mind, this is the first time that I've ever used this type of product and used this technique. So this is something that anybody can be able to accomplish and get the same type of results. The last thing that I want to try is just taking some of the scraps that was underneath the countertop and be able to have it on this popsicle stick and drag it through at random angles and see how this will flow in there. This is a technique that I think is going to create some fantastic looking veins. We'll know in just a few minutes, but you can already see how it's starting to flow and self-level into this epoxy. Now I'm going to try this in a few more different locations, and let's see the results that we get. Here's one I did just a few minutes ago, and that is just looking beautiful. Here's another one that I did, and it is all leveled out now, and I think that looks so natural. It looks like an actual vein where it had cracked. And here's that one that I just showed you, and it is beginning to blend in just to be a gorgeous vein. So this is something else that you can try and experiment with and just have fun with. Don't be afraid to try different things with this epoxy. So I'm going to do this one more time to show you. I just have the popsicle stick and I'm going to just move it across the surface. I'm going to touch the popsicle stick in different places, stretch the epoxy out, and then have it come right across. Then I'm going to drag it, touch the popsicle stick, drag it some more, and just do this at a random angle. And that's the vein. Now this countertop is absolutely gorgeous, but we need to be able to protect it. So what I'm going to do is be able to very lightly sand it with 220 grit paper, and then we're going to clean it. We're going to clean it with a paper towel and 91% alcohol. And that will get all of the residue and dust off of this, ready to be able to put the clear coat on it. And all we're doing is just roughing up the surface a little bit so that we can create that mechanical bond. Now I'm going to wipe everything down with the 91% alcohol and get it completely clean. The most important thing I want you to consider is being able to be dust-free. Now this is being done in my normal shop, and there's sawdust everywhere. The consideration that I made was that I had no other projects going on at all. I kept the fans off so that no sawdust would be blown around and settle onto this epoxy. And the alcohol cleans and dries almost immediately. To be able to put this clear top coat on, I'm using the Stone Coat Countertops, and this is the art coating that we're going to be using today. This has a UV protection, it's a non-yellowing, and it should last for years. Now this gets mixed 1-to-1, and after I mix it up, and you mix it for about 2 minutes, then I'm going to go ahead and pour it onto the countertop. I'm going to spread it with this 1/8 inch by 1/8 inch notch trowel, and then I'm going to use this brush basically just to chop it in and be able to get all of that epoxy to be able to spread out and be even all the way across. And then it's going to dry absolutely crystal clear and flat. Now I will torch it just to be able to get rid of any lingering bubbles, but this is an amazingly easy process to be able to do. Now this is a brand new brush, and I want to pull all these bristles real hard to see if there's any loose bristles. Now ideally you would want a brush that was black, especially working with the light colors, but couldn't find one, and this is the closest one that I could get to it. Stone Coat Countertop does sell the ones in their store that has the black bristles, and should one come out, it's a lot easier to be able to see it black in that clear coat than to be able to have one of these beige colors. And we're going to use the 1-to-1 ratio on here, and I am going to pour part B first. That is the hardener. And remember, it takes about 3 ounces per square foot. I have about 10 square feet that I have to be able to cover, so all total I'm going to use about 30 ounces of the product. So just going ahead and pouring in the part B to about the 16-ounce line. Then I'm going to add part A. Now this is a very thick resin, and that's by design. And you can see how this flows as a much thicker product. I'm going to go ahead and fill the bucket up now to the 32-inch line, and it'll be ready to mix. And I'm going to go ahead and mix this now for 2 minutes. Okay, I've been mixing now for about 2 minutes. So I'm going to go ahead and take this out. And now I'm ready to go ahead and pour this. There's no really right or wrong way to be able to pour this product out. You want to be able to cover the whole center section, but you don't really want it to drip off the edge quite yet. You want to be able to go ahead and spread this out evenly and get a good amount of product on all of the different surfaces. Then I'm going to take the trowel and just spread this around. Now I don't want it going over the edge quite yet, so I'll just come right up to the edge. And I can put this back into the bucket. And I don't want to start with a dry brush. You want to put that into the product and get it soaking. So now I've got a good loaded brush, and I can just go through and catch everything just at random. You're breaking the surface tension, making this where it will flow. And I want to get all this done really, really good. And I'm going to do the same thing with the edges. Make sure that they're covered good. And this also helps to mix everything up one last time. And I've got plenty of working time on this. I don't have to be in a rush. But I've got all the edges, so I'm just going to double check one more time. Just right in here. And then I'm going to come in here and just smooth this horizontally. And that'll make some nice, really pretty clean edges. Then I'm going to take the torch and just go over this and eliminate any of the bubbles. All that has to happen now is for this to dry. You can see just a few waves in the product from the lights, and that's because it's in the process of self-leveling. I'm going to go ahead and wait about 24 hours. I'm going to come back and show you what it looks like when it's completely dry. Thank you for watching today. I hope that you learned a few things and realized just how easy it is to be able to make a countertop from the Stone Coat Countertop epoxy resins. They're fantastic to be able to work with, and it's extremely easy to be able to do. Now, if you liked the video and you learned something from it, go ahead and give me a thumbs up, and while you're there, go ahead and subscribe and hit the bell notification so that you'll be notified on all the different videos that I'm uploading. I've got a lot more of exciting videos coming in the very near future, and you're not going to want to miss out. So until next time, I want to thank everybody for being able to watch today and learn a few new things, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video that I do, whatever that project may be.